All right, we're just about to get into external ballistics here on the next video. But before we do that, we're going to have to do the final equipment selection video. This video is going to be about peripheral equipment selection. There's going to be a lot of instruments and tools you're going to need to make an extreme range shot. Perhaps you remember from one of the earlier optics videos, I kind of briefly went over some of the things we're going to have to correct for in an extreme range shot. And in order to make those corrections, we're going to have real precise measurements of all our meteorological, environmental conditions, and we're going to have to get exact measurements on our range and a lot of things like that. So let's go ahead and just get started on this, and we'll address these individual things as we look at them. Let's see what we got in the drag bag here. Obviously, your number one piece of equipment, besides your spotter, you know the spotter really is probably your primary piece of equipment that you're going to want to take with you. It's very difficult to make long-range shots without a spotter helping you out sometimes. So, and we'll get into more detail on shooter-spotter relationships later, and all the different details of responsibilities between those two people. But we're going to look at the first item here, and that's a rifle equipped with an optical sight, obviously. We spend a lot of time on the rifle and a huge amount of time on optical sights. So hopefully you have that in your drag bag, okay? Your second item is going to be ammunition. And we did spend time on cartridge selection and projectile selection. So you're going to need about 100 rounds. That's about how much you're going to want to take afield with you. Now, that's a minimum. If you have a real small cartridge, like a 223 or something like that, or one of these short-action cartridges, and you have extra room and you're not shy to carry a little more weight, go ahead and carry more. You can never carry too much ammo. You never know what kind of complications you might run into. You might have to re-zero, or you might have to do some range confirmations before you make your shot. Even if you're going on a hunting trip and you might only need that one shot, hopefully when we're all done here, you're only going to need one shot for any given target. But it's definitely a lot easier to just have it with you than it is to try to go back and get some after you decide you need it. So 100 rounds, that should be plenty. You can store it however you want. I'd recommend like a good plastic box. Something that would be a little more watertight might be better. You can also, if it's real wet where you're operating, I would recommend keeping it in a waterproof plastic or a rubber bag. In addition to being inside the plastic ammo box. And obviously, you're going to want to be carrying the ammunition that weapon system is zeroed for, and that all your range confirmations were done in. So if you have been developing all these charts and stuff for one particular ammo, and you're going to go hunting, let's say, and you want to try a different hunting bullet, that's you're going to want to carry the ammunition that rifle is zeroed for, because at extreme ranges, it's going to hit in a totally different spot, and we'll get into that and external ballistics more, but that should be pretty obvious. Carry the ammunition that your weapon system is zeroed for. That's pretty crucial. Another thing you're going to want to make sure you have with you is if your rifle is equipped with detachable magazines and you have extras, you want to have those with as well. The next major thing you're going to need is probably earmuffs or hearing protection. Now, I don't want to sound like a ninny, but there's a lot of reasons for that. You're going to be doing a lot of shooting. So make sure you got both your earmuffs and your earplugs, especially if you're shooting a really big rifle like one of the BMGs. You might need to wear both, just as precautionary. Sometimes earplugs don't quite do it. Your rifle should be equipped with a bipod. I would recommend that. You're going to want to get something that's relatively sturdy. It depends a lot on the weight of your rifle as well. If you've got a real heavy rifle, like a 50 or something over 20 pounds, you might need something pretty stout, like a Parker Hale M85 or a M82 type bipod, like you see on the Barretts, or maybe even a Versapod. Something like that would probably work if you've got a real heavy rifle. My big rifle is right around 20 pounds. And it could use a little bit more heavy of a bipod than I have on there, but I actually do really like the Harris ultralight bipods. If you're careful with them and you learn how not to tug on them when they're deployed, you won't have any problems with the things folding up. But if I had to give a recommendation on a bipod for most rifles, counting out real heavy rifles, I would recommend like a Harris swiveling bipod with the 9 to 13-inch notch legs. And that just seems to be by far the best one that's going to be the quickest to deploy. You definitely want a swivel-type bipod. And by swivel-type bipod, I'm talking about is there's a spring-loaded and it swivels on the bottom, so that if you're on uneven ground, you're not going to have to fiddle with knobs and the legs trying to get everything balanced out. And if you have to make a direction of fire change while you're deployed on the fly, you're not going to have to readjust your bipod every time, because it will have the function of swiveling, which is going to be very, very, very handy. A lot of guys think that the other ones seem a lot more sturdy, and they kind of are, but you're definitely going to want the flexibility of a swiveling bipod. And basically, the Harris Swivel series is going to work fine, and your Parker Hales, your Versapods, and your M82s will all swivel probably more than a guy would like. But the Harris is adjustable. There's a knob on the front you can turn in order to increase or decrease tension. So that's my recommendation for a bipod. There's a lot of different brands out there. It's not super important. Make sure you do have that feature on your bipod, and also make sure that it is sturdy enough to support the weight of your rifle. You are definitely going to need a sandbag. Like I said before, we're going to be laying prone most of the time. The sandbag will be used to place under the toe of the buttstock of the rifle, and that's what you're going to primarily be using to move the rifle around. And when we get more into the fundamentals of long-range shooting, you're going to find that it's extremely problematic if we're muscling the rifle onto the target. And the way we're going to do this, if you want a real steady platform when you make the shot, is we're going to have that sandbag deployed underneath the toe of the buttstock. So that's real important. You don't need to spend a lot of money on that. I basically made one for $1, or however. I just found an old pair of BDU slacks, and I cut out some cloth, and I sewed it together, and I just filled it with sand. It's not hard to make a sandbag. You don't need to go down to the store and buy a shooting sandbag for $35 or whatever crazy amount they're trying to get from you. You're just going to need a sandbag that can support the toe of the buttstock, and that doesn't need to be a real huge sandbag, but you don't want a real tiny one. So let's look at the next deal. You're gonna want to bring a rifle cleaning kit into the field with you whenever you go. Now, for reasons we're going to discuss later, you're not going to be constantly cleaning this rifle out in the field, but you do want the kit available in case something goofy happens. You could fill the barrel with water or mud or something like that, or a number of things could happen, and you're going to want the ability to go ahead and maintain that weapon. Or if you're out for extremely long durations of time, you're definitely going to want to have your cleaning kit with you, because whatever cleaning kits might be issued for a standard battle rifle, if you're in a military application, may not be appropriate, obviously, for the weapon system you're using. And I would recommend a kit that allows you to clean the bore from the rear. So you're going to want a cleaning rod long enough to go all the way through the action. You don't want to clean from the muzzle. That's the main suggestion I have. Obviously, you're going to want brass bristles instead of steel bristles on your brush. You don't want to use a steel bristled brush on your bore. For solvent and things like that, I wouldn't get a real aggressive copper removing solvent, and we'll discuss reasons for that later. But you're going to want to leave a consistent amount of copper fouling in your bore for reasons of copper buildup, which can change your point of impact. And we're going to basically build up a certain amount of seasoning of copper fouling in your barrel. And we're going to kind of leave it alone after that, actually. So we're going to go against the grain of what a lot of gun magazines might have told you before. But if you want to make extreme range first hit shots, or what a lot of people refer to as cold bore shots, you're not going to want to overly aggressively clean your rifle in the field, especially before you make a shot, because that could change your point of impact dramatically. So just like a boresnake even would work pretty good. Those are real small, but like I usually keep in my drag bag a real long cleaning rod with the jag and the brush and all the other stuff, some patches, and you're going to also probably want to take with you, if you're going to be out on a long deployment too, lug grease for the bolt lugs, and obviously some gun oil. So just a standard rifle cleaning kit that can that's long enough in order to go through the action in the back, and that should be fine. You don't need anything fancy again, but just get something that'll work. You're going to want to take a lens cleaning kit as well. This might be every bit as important as the rifle cleaning kit. If your optics get all full of crud, It's not going to be a good deal. And you don't want to have to scrub mud off your $1,500 optics. Some of you guys spend a lot of coin on your scopes, and you're not going to want to mess with the polishing on the lenses and the coatings they put on there. So you do want a lens cleaning kit. If you've got a real premium scope, they'll come with a lens cleaning kit, and you'll want to use whatever they've given you. You want to use a lint-free cloth. I would recommend carrying like a camel's hair paintbrush, like a brand new one, not one with like old paint thinner and paint on it, obviously, but a brand new, perfectly clean camel's hair paintbrush works very good for removing dust and things like that from the lens. You're not going to just want to rub on that with your shirt sleeve or something. That's not going to be very good. So you're going to also need armorer's tools. Whatever kind of screwdrivers you might need to disassemble your weapon, or your optics, your mounts and your rings, Allen wrenches for the turrets. If you have a turret with if you need to reset it with Allen screws, you're going to want the wrenches for that. And I would recommend getting a couple extras, putting them in different spots in your kit so that you don't lose that, because I hate it when a guy goes out and he can't find your Allen screws. That's like the worst nightmare a guy has. You get all set up and you need to slip your turrets on your scope and you don't have the tools for it, and that might even make you say a naughty word possibly. Okay, we're going to need ballistics charts, obviously. You're going to need your primary functions, your secondary functions, your ammunition burn rate conversion charts and tables. You're going to need standard pressure and temperature with altitudes chart. That would be wise to have. You're going to want your wind correction tables, your Calc forms, moving target acquisition tables, all that stuff. You're going to need that. So a lot of guys carry like a miniature binder. You don't need anything super fancy. They do make some tactical binders that you can buy. They're like a sniper's binder, but that's not necessary. You can just use something you get at Walmart or whatever. It'll be fine. Just something to keep all your little documents and cards in order will be more than adequate. We're going to get into detail. We're going to do several videos on developing these charts. So don't get too worked up if there's one of these deals you're seeing here that is not familiar to you yet. We will get into this in excruciating detail because that's going to be very important. And there's a lot more to it than meets the eye, especially for extreme range shots. So stay tuned for that part. That's where the real gold of this series is going to be, is how to put together effective long-range charts. And I have kind of a unique system that we've developed here, and it works very, very well. You're going to need a scientific calculator. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's like a graphing type calculator. You ain't going to need to do graphs per se, but you're going to need to be able to do trig functions. So just a standard scientific calculator like a TI-30, I believe is the cheap one. You can get those for like $9 at Walmart. Or some guys like to use a TI-83. That's about $100. That does graphing. Either one will work fine. You don't need the $100 one. A TI-30 will work fine, and it's a relatively sturdy calculator. You can pretty much beat the crap out of them, and they'll still work. Also, you're gonna want a backup calculator. You're gonna be doing calculations, and you can break stuff. It's totally possible you can break or lose things. So I would get a scientific calculator, but I'd have a backup regular pocket calculator. Doesn't need to be scientific, or you can get two of them. You just want to make sure that on these crucial items that are relatively inexpensive, you have a backup, okay? So the calculator is very important. You're going to want the scientific calculator for sure, and just a normal pocket calculator as a backup. And you're going to also want, if either of these take any kind of batteries, you're going to want 2 sets of batteries, and that's going to be a rule. If I neglect to say that on one of these pieces of electronic equipment, if anything takes batteries, make sure you have at least 2 sets of batteries for everything, because when you don't want your batteries to run out is when they will run out every time. So always have extra batteries. I would strongly recommend this next item. This is an analog calculator, and this particular one we have here is a Mildot Master. Now, we're going to probably do a video just explaining how this thing is important. This will be particularly handy when we're doing our spotting and second shot corrections. This is good for ranging, but this is a non-electric form of calculator. It's just analog, and this is specifically made for Mildot scopes. So if you're running a Mildot reticle in your rifle scope, this thing is going to be very, very helpful. It will also help you to do conversions at various ranges between mils and minutes of angle. If for some reason you the scope you're using does have different systems of angular measurement in it. So if you did get stuck with a scope with just a Mildot reticle and like minutes of angle on the turrets, this thing is going to be very, very helpful for you doing all your different conversions. This thing will also do your angle of fire for you. It's not real high tech, but it's the way they used to do it in the old days. And actually, most professionals out in the field do still just use like a protractor with a string and a weight. But the Mildot Master, you can hang a string from it, and you can put a weight on the end, and it has basically a protractor, which gives you your angle of fire, which is going to be very important when we're doing our firing solutions as well. So this, you won't need an angle cosign indicator for $120 if you buy one of these Mildot Masters. I think they're like $25 or something like that, maybe $29. That seems like a lot for a goofy little card like this, an analog calculator, but it's well worth the money, actually. So I highly endorse that product. Another thing you're going to want in your kit, especially if you're not going to be using one of those Mildot Masters I just showed you, is you're going to need something to calculate your angle of fire. That's very important. You might need a protractor with a weighted string. That's one way of doing it. They do sell neat little gadgets like angle cosign indicators. They're actually pretty slick. I actually do not use one. I go the old school method. It seems to work fine. But the angle cosign indicator, if you've got room next to your optic there and you've got like a rail that'll have enough room on it, go ahead and throw one of them angle cosign indicators on there. But again, if you do have the Mildot Master, you don't need to worry about getting one of those pieces of equipment. If you're starting to run out of coin or something, that Mildot Master will cover a lot of these things. Next thing you're going to definitely want to take into the field is an abundance of writing utensils. You're going to want like 2 black pens, 2 red pens, and a couple of pencils and an eraser, things like that. Just you want to have everything in duplicates, especially if they're small, inexpensive items and you're carrying a huge amount of junk anyways. Just make sure you have them. We're going to be doing a lot of writing. You're going to be drawing pictures in the field when we do our range cards, and it is nice to have 2 different colors, particularly just for the range cards, because you're going to be drawing the terrain in front of you, and then you can mark off your target reference points with a red pen or something like that, so it's easier to just take a glance at. So different colors, or if you want to get real artistic, you can get like a whole array of colors or whatever. I mean, it doesn't matter. But I usually try to keep at least a few pens and pencils in my kit with me. The next thing we're going to keep is logs. Different kinds of logs. We're going to have a shooter's log. We're going to have ammo log and a measured TRP dimensions log. This you can just use like a small little notebook that you get at Walmart or whatever. Again, if you want, doesn't have to be anything expensive. You can get it right in the rain. If you've got unlimited supplies, those are kind of nice. They don't get all messed up if you get them wet. The ink doesn't run. But I for the longest time, I've just used just whatever cheapest notebook you can find. And if you really want it to be olive drab, you can spray paint it or something. So you don't need to spend a lot of money on all this stuff. Otherwise, you're going to run out of money. But a shooter's log, that's going to be basically keeping track of all your shots that you're going to make. And we'll explain this in more detail when we get into our firing solutions and our advanced external ballistics, but there's going to be a lot of variables, and you're definitely going to want to log your shots so that you can go back and study what's going on. You don't want to go off memory. You're going to want to log your time, your actual horizontal range, atmospheric conditions, muzzle velocity, and your ammo temperature, and your point of impact that you projected so that you can compare that to your actual point of impact. And then you'll be using these shooter's logs to basically verify and refine all your ballistics tables, which were basically based on mathematical algorithms. But the bullet is the only thing that's going to really verify those things. It's going to just fly where it's going to fly, and you're going to have to adjust your math to suit your bullet, and you're going to have to know what's going on. And in order to know what's going on, you're going to definitely need a shooter's log, and you just need a small notebook for that. An ammunition log, that can even be in the same notebook if it's thick enough. And you're just going to want to dedicate like a couple pages to load information, what exact loads you are using, because a guy does forget that stuff. ammo batch number if you're using factory-loaded ammunition, or if you've got it from the supply. You're going to want to keep a round count. You're going to want to know how many rounds you fired in each session each day. We're going to need to know that for various reasons. We're going to get into that in internal ballistics. And internal ballistics is what goes on inside the rifle as the bullet's on its way out the barrel before it exits the muzzle. And there are things that will change over time. Your bore will get more polished as it breaks in. Your muzzle velocity could change. So you're going to want to keep track of these things so that you can do a real good study, so that you can really, if you want to nail stuff that's real tiny at extreme ranges, you're going to have to be keeping track of all this stuff here. So an ammo log. And you're definitely going to also keep it when you've cleaned your bore in your ammo log. That's going to be another very important thing as well. The third log you're going to need to keep is a measured TRP dimensions log. A TRP is a target reference point, and we're going to be measuring different items you might see out in the field so that we can use those as target reference points to range different objects in the field. If your laser rangefinder is not always going to work, and it's not always going to be an option, so you're either going to be using the mil scale reticle in your scope to make ranging estimations, or you're going to be using a theodolite for range determination. And it's only going to be as accurate as the base of the triangle. And the base of the triangle you're going to be using for your trigonometry is the target reference point sizes of various objects. For example, you could look at a fence post, and one thing you would have in your target reference point dimensions would be the typical size of fence posts in your area. And you would use that to make your range estimations by using the Mildots in your scope. So in this log, you're going to be, especially if you're operating in a military setting and you're in an urban environment, you're going to be taking a lot of different measurements of various things you might see on the battlefield. And you're going to be writing down the sizes of things that might serve as target reference points one day. And that'll be crucial to have all those dimensions in your log. And we'll explain more of that later on. But that's particularly important for our men and women in uniform out there, okay? So let's look at the next thing you're going to need. You're going to need range cards. These are going to be very important when you're out in the field. Now, you don't necessarily need the DA Form 5786 or something like that, the military's sniper range card. You don't have to go out and buy those or something. You could probably print them off the computer. If you could find them online, I'm sure, if you really wanted to. All you're going to need is basically some paper. So like a notebook is going to work fine. You're just going to be drawing pictures of the range that you're looking at, and you're going to draw on there where your target reference points are, and you're going to just list the ranges to those. So just a regular notebook will work fine for that. Another thing you're going to definitely need is maps of your area of operations. Now, you can have a lot of you guys have these super phones nowadays and cell phones that know everything. But I think it would be very unwise to plan on relying on just one piece of equipment, particularly a cell phone that could very easily lose reception for all number of reasons. Or you could run out of batteries, or it could get turned off, or there's a million things that could happen. So you're going to want to actually keep paper maps. I would strongly recommend, when we're talking about all these things, there's lots of gadgets out there that are electronic. And as we get more and more into the distant future here, we're approaching 2013 now, right? Guys are tempted to really fall in love with some of these electronic devices, and I will cover some of those as well. And they can be handy, but we're going to learn how to do this all with a pencil and paper, so that this stuff will work for you no matter what kind of technology is available to you out in the field, okay? So you're going to want paper maps of your area of operations for sure. You're going to be using that for range determination to your targets and lots of other things as well. Another thing you're going to want to keep with you is a Lensatic Compass. You're going to be using this not only for land navigation possibly, but you're going to need this to do your angle of fire on your shots. You're going to need that to figure out your Coriolis. You don't need a super precise compass to figure out your Coriolis effect, but if you're going to be carrying a compass, it would also be nice, and you're also carrying maps, you're going to use this to triangulate on your position and do your ranging as well. So a Lensatic compass would be nice to have. You can get like a military sighting compass, the M4580, for like $35 probably if you shop around. So it would be very nice to have a decent Lensatic compass. All right, the next few items on the list are going to be very essential, especially for extreme range.